That is a good question, Matteo. So, just to repeat it for the recording. So, visualization of rainbow colors, like in the image here, compared to it happening spontaneously. And also, what's up with Thogal visions, right? Good question. So it's very simple. Visualizations in Amrita Mandala are purposefully very simple, very basic, but also very direct. I didn't want, back in the day when I was practicing with different teachers, specifically one Indian yogi, I practiced very specific visualizations, much more complex than what we do in Amrita Mandala. And as you might know, in many schools of Tibetan Vajrayana, visualizations are very specific. So, for example, if we do Guru Yoga with Guru Rinpoche and use visualization as a way to tune in, I just generally say that think of any image or a statue you might have at home that you've seen many times. Just think of that image of Guru Rinpoche and place it simply in your aura in front of you, or place Guru Rinpoche's whole body in the place of your own whole body. And I rarely, I say something simple like, just imagine that the clothes are, clean and nice. You can imagine any type of colors in clothing. You can visualize the spear. This spear here, it's called Katvanga. It's like a tantric spear. It exists in Hindu Tantra already, long time before Buddhist Tantra. And he's also holding, with his other hand, he's holding a Vajra here. And, so the way how it's in many schools done is that you have to visualize, you have to get the visualization in great detail. But I have never taught it that way because, well, in my experience, it is not necessary to do it like that. And especially if, if you struggle with, you're not that visually active, not that visually talented, then you can get it eventually, but, might require lots of time that lay people might not have to get that visualization perfectly done. But like I've always said, in tantric practice, there are three aspects to practice: external, internal, and secret. External means that you're doing some practice, visualization, chanting, repeating mantra, practicing mudras, doing any of these things. And this is just the external aspect that's purpose is to give us an energetic experience, so that you get in touch with pure energy or Shakti, be it Guru Rinpoche Shakti or a Shakti of any deity. So doing techniques and practices is very important, but it's more important to get in touch with the Shakti and just feel it in the system. And through this internal, we get in touch with the secret, which is our own basic nature. So through deity Shakti, through Guru Shakti, we get in touch, we gradually familiarize ourselves with our own pure nature. So this is why, because it can be done so simply. If you have, like countless times we have in practice sessions, we have chanted simply Namo Guru Rinpoche, Namo Guru Rinpoche. Sometimes we've done it all day long on retreats, from morning till night. But it's a really simple mantra. Namo Guru Rinpoche, 7 syllables. So it's not like a page-long mantra. It's very simple, but it works. So here also I have purposefully avoided long mantras because of our lay situation. For example, there's a long Vajrasattva mantra, the famous 100-syllable Vajrasattva mantra that is used in all schools of Tibetan Buddhism, and it's a beautiful mantra. But to even learn it takes much, much longer than to learn Namo Guru Rinpoche or Namo Vajrasattvaye. Right? So, like I said, this is the reason why our techniques are very short, very concise, very simple, so that you can get from the external, from the performing part to feeling, sensing part. And having said that, like I have often said, in the beginning, which means like the first few years, it is better to do too much of techniques, a bit too much of dynamic concentration, perhaps a bit too much of deity mantras, guru mantras, than too little. Why? Because we need to clarify things for ourselves from the start. We need to clarify what the, heart experience is, what the recognition, what the basic state, Buddha nature is. So that needs to be, because it is possible to clarify that from the beginning. It is possible to, use these practices and recognize one's Buddha nature on daily basis from day one. But if we practice too little, if we do too little, if we practice too little of those external practices, probably this internal energetic experience might not be that it's clear enough, and consequentially might not be that the recognition won't be, you won't have that recognition of yourself as a Buddha on daily basis or regular basis. So our visualizations are simple, but there is nothing missing there. So even when if we don't, many of these visualizations in Tibetan Vajrayana are very, very complex. So there's all kinds of things happening, and there's chakra spinning, and there's Tibetan, like mantra letters in Tibetan script that you are to visualize and repeat at the same time. We don't do it like that. And that the Tibetan way is not wrong. It's simply, again, because very few in our Sangha has the opportunity to practice all day long, which is why our practices are short and simple and very direct, so that even you ladies and gentlemen who have perhaps only 1 hour formal practice time a day, or maybe 2 hours, which is also quite little, especially in the context of attaining Buddhahood in this life. I've still, taught the practices in a way that it's possible, that you can make your practice work. Okay? So your question, how does it become, you asked, one of our basic visualizations is the rainbow jewel, where we visualize our bodies and our auras made of transparent jewel, together or separately with many rainbows emanating throughout the system. And then we have little bit different visualizations. So that's the visualization for the causal body, and then we have little bit different visualization for the astral body because the colors are different. But when do visualizations or mantras or mudras, when do they become spontaneous? Which is what you're asking. They become spontaneous when we, how to say this? When we know ourselves. So when there is significantly less self-centered, self-based, selfish stuff in the system, and the our spontaneous nature starts shining through. I often say that that when you open the 11th bhumi, it's very special, 11th major awakening experience, because then the knowing quality of awareness, so-called rikpa, becomes a prevalent state. So it's like that. So when, and it same applies to astral body also. So of course it depends from one person to the next, how much or how little traumatization you have, or how caught up in patterns and habits of selfishness you are. But it's the same principle. So when significant amount of those habit patterns have been healed, have been released, then automatically this basic nature of ours that has pure and only positive qualities, only positive energy, then it starts shining through. So this means that your once external practice, you can do formal practices less and less. And you can just, when you sit down, or even if you don't sit down, when you're having a tea break, this recognition, this basic state with the rainbows, that aliveness is spontaneously there in the causal body, in the astral body. And your mind state at that point is also very different than it is without, bhumis of the causal body shut, or lots of those habit patterns of selfishness and trauma still in the body. It's a completely different mind state, as you know. So that's how it works. Familiarization. And then you asked a question about Thogal visions. So I have received Thogal teachings from my masters, as well as from couple of different Rinpoches who are alive. But I haven't done like a Thogal retreat. I haven't studied with any Tibetan Buddhist Lama these things in detail, and have never done a retreat. But Thogal visions, I remember many years ago I wanted to find a Tibetan Lama who I could study with, but I really couldn't find. Chatral Rinpoche died, so I didn't have a chance to study with him. And then I tried a few others and met a few others, but it wasn't a click. So that happened. But during that time I was very concerned. I was very interested in these Thogal visions. If you read any Dzogchen book, they speak of Trekcho and Thogal. Trekcho means cutting through, and Thogal means literally leaping over. And Trekcho means emptiness practice, emptiness stage. and Thogal is the so-called rainbow body Atiyoga, rainbow body meditation. And the difference between Trekcho Atiyoga and Thogal Atiyoga is that it's actually very simple. So in Trekcho, with emptiness practice, the result is clarity. The result is spontaneous clarity. And this means that whether your mind is thoughtless, or there are thoughts or any mental emotional content, clarity stays. And it doesn't stay separate from thoughts and emotions, but thoughts and emotions are rest in this selfless clarity, or so-called emptiness of phenomena. And so this is head stuff, you know. It's clarity. A good synonym for it is sobriety. That head is clear and awake. So this is mainly has to do with the head, because head is the seat of the causal body, and head is the seat of Dharmakaya, the body of Dharma. In a Hindu system, in ancient Hindu system, they call it Jnana Deha, like Jnana Kaya, which means knowledge or wisdom body. So head is the seat of that. And when I say seat, it means that its main center is in the head, but that realization deals with the whole subtle body. Okay, so that's Trekcho terrain. I teach, well, you have learned shouting practice, which is, in the last satsang I was speaking about this. You have learned some so-called semdzins, sem, S-E-M, D-Z-I-N, semdzin, that I have learned from my masters, and shouting practice is a semdzin. Semdzin means that there's a short technique like that you can quickly apply to establish yourself in the basic state again, easily. So there are 13 semdzins in Amrita Mandala. I have taught these, not in recent years, but I have taught these over the years. But when we come to Thogal aspect of Atiyoga, that leaping over, that rainbow body aspect of Atiyoga, or non-meditation, you could also say, it means that you already have established clarity, sobriety. So you feel clear and sober. And then you switch, so you're no longer, your recognition isn't about clarity, but it's about aliveness. It's about that it's not only a clear diamond you're meditating, but you shift your focus so that you start focusing on and experiencing, sensing that aliveness aspect, kindness, love, compassion, happiness, joyfulness of our awareness. And then the seat of practice shifts to the heart. That's where the seat of, in Buddhist terms, Sambhogakaya, what did Ramalinga call it? Sambhogakaya? Oh, I forgot the Hindu term. But that's the seat of love, kindness, aliveness, this energetic quality of basic awareness. So what I remember from traditional Dzogchen I don't teach traditional Dzogchen. Well, it's traditional in the sense that it's the same basic nature, but I don't teach it the same way as they practice in Tibetan Nyingma, in Guru Rinpoche's tradition. And there's a reasons for that also. But you practice Thogal, like I said, switching from clarity aspect to aliveness aspect. And it's a non-meditation practice. It's non-meditation. You just sit there. And familiarize with this aliveness. So you asked about the visions, wasn't it so? Yeah, okay. So visions, they talk about this. It's not openly discussed anywhere, as far as I know, in texts, in books, and that's the way how Nyingma lineage holders want to have it. But any practice, any path is a process of gradual familiarization. And that familiarization in this case is with the aliveness aspect, Sambhogakaya. Sambhogakaya means literally, sam means balanced. I think it's the same word as in samadhi, so you have balanced. Bhoga means pleasure. So this is not worldly, what a nightmare of a word, worldly pleasure, but a balanced pleasure. Pleasure that is even. And we are talking about a kaya that is sambhoga. So the body of even pleasure, even enjoyment, body of even bliss, balanced bliss. So you familiarize with that. Yeah, and it's I have some experience, recently in the first satsang a month ago, first satsang of the year, I spoke about the three paths, or I introduced the name of the third path in Amrita Mandala, the path of health and great bliss, together with the path of wisdom and clarity, emptiness side, the path of healing and light, astral body part, and then the third one, the path of healing and health and great bliss. I have already taught the practices of the path of health and great bliss, most of them. I have taught, physical practices, different types, dancing, Amrita asana, Vajra body, standing, some Qigong type, Chinese yoga type practices, and then of course the meditations. Okay, so practices for the physical body. Okay, my experience, so in my personal case, I'm still practicing, gradually familiarizing myself with this Sambhogakaya, this body of even pleasure, body of even bliss. But I'm not completely, I haven't finished this stage of my practice. But what I can say from my experience, Dzogchen sources speak of seeing these visions. And sometimes, depending on which Lama is talking about it, they describe actual visions they're having. Actual visions, like seeing something specific from Tigles, which is the energy of the astral body. Tigle or Bindu energy is the energy of the astral body. So, seeing anything from small particles, these bindus or tigles, bindu means literally point, and the vision of that is, it's actually very easy to have. If you're outside on a sunny day and you squint your eyes a little bit like this, you can start seeing these tiny rainbow colored balls in your field of vision, and those are bindus or these tigles. And then the more you are familiar with your Sambhogakaya, this aliveness aspect, the more of those tigles are there. So, but that's just the simplest vision. There are other simple particles, but from there the visions start expanding, and it ends in seeing mandalas, full mandalas. If you've ever thought of, in Tibetan tradition, they have these big mandala paintings, and sometimes the monks spend weeks, making these sand mandalas on floor. It has so many little details in them. Those details come from visions. They are not they are not like, let's make a fancy geometrical yantra. It's not like that. They come from visions that somebody at some point has had and has then drawn, painted it, and that's how the tantras come to exist. Anything from Kala Chakra to other classical tantras. I have also learned Kala Chakra practice from my gurus, but again in very concise, very simple form. So from tigles to big mandalas. But what does that mean? Seeing mandalas. In Amrita Mandala we have refuge, which is fivefold. Taking refuge in Guru, his Pure Land, Buddha, Dharma and Sangha. That's a relative refuge, and then the absolute, I am Guru, I'm in Pure Land, I am Buddha, Dharma, Sangha. I am. That prayer describes, in short form though, it describes seeing those big mandalas. I have often said when I'm leading sessions that, at some point of practice that, you recognize yourself as a Buddha, not visualize yourself as a Buddha, but you recognize that your own nature is the same as Padmasambhava's or Babaji's or Shakyamuni Buddha's. You recognize it. And then you might also recognize that you're sitting at the center of a mandala. Mandala means sphere of influence. Sphere of influence. And you are at the center of it as a Buddha. And that mandala around you, well, you can view it in a couple of different ways, but basically everything around you is a mandala. And this is a pure land where we are, wherever we are. Pure land. What does that mean? Means that people near you, close to you, wherever you go, wherever you are, you don't see negativity, you don't see distortions, you just see Buddhas in a pure land. Fully awakened, fully enlightened beings in a pure land. Pure land means like, we have these mini pure lands all over the globe. We have consecrated temples, consecrated cathedrals, monasteries, stupas, pilgrimage sites, holy sites. And when you physically go to such place, you can feel that it is not the same as, you kind of enter this different dimension of sobriety, aliveness, groundedness, right? Again, you're not necessarily seeing some fancy geometrical things in your third eye, but you enter this different world, yet stay in this world. So you don't leave this world and go to some heavenly realm. This is a very important point, because lots of people are confused about that we'd have to leave these physical bodies and this screwed up physical world to enter Pure Land. No. There is somebody who, coming from Zen tradition and having been asked by Terayama Roshi, my Zen master, to continue his lineage. Zen tradition, and specifically Rinzai style of Zen, is very dear to me. And the greatest Rinzai Zen master of the past 500 years was Zen master Hakuin. And he says in his most famous short prayer or text that this place is Pure Land, and this body is the body of a Buddha. So we see that it becomes obvious when we recognize who we truly are. But until then, we see the asshole of a neighbor, and we don't see the world. We see the world very ordinarily up until that point. But isn't it that I'm sure some of you have had this experience that when you have a cessation, pop, and suddenly your perception of yourself and your spouse, about your dog, about your home, about your neighbors, about everything is different. This is a glimpse to Pure Land. You might be fed up with getting kebab from the same kebab shop down the block. But when you have a cessation and you get that kebab with French fries and ketchup, it's like Amrita. And then you have a sip of Coke. Ooh, Amrita. Have you had this experience? Ice cream. Bloody hell, it's the greatest thing. Sex. Little things. Not only moments of obvious pleasure, but you're so alive. So alive and sober, and yet completely down to earth. The only change is in our mind, is in our energy. Isn't that interesting and fascinating? Isn't it? That the only difference between ourselves and Buddhas is in the mind. The mind that they have, the mind that we have. Maybe something that came to my mind about that mandala thing. Like a take, take a brief comment about mandala. I don't know if you have ever met a fully enlightened being. There are at least few that I'm aware of. I always speak of hugging Saint Amma, who is lovely. I hold her here above my head. And she's very easy to meet because she's publicly available. And then there might be few others who are also fully enlightened Buddhas. But even some practitioners, yogis, yoginis, who are not yet there, but who have perhaps cultivated for a long time and realized to a significant degree. I remember experiences when I was much younger and much less experienced young man, a young practitioner, when I met, let me think, I met a couple of Tibetan Rinpoches in the early of 2003, in January when I started practicing. In February 2003, like a month after I started formal practice, Mingyu Rinpoche was actually in Finland and I met him. But I wasn't, with love and respect, he was such a young man then, like still wet behind the ears, and I wasn't at all impressed of his energy. But then I went to Japan the next year in 2004 and I met Terayama Roshi. That was an instant. The very moment when our eyes met the first time in Yamaoka Teshu's temple on 19th July 2004, my search for a teacher was over. I was so impressed of his. He walked like a kind of like his energy was like a mixture of a king and a yogi master whose body and his movement was like soft cotton. Beautiful presence, beautiful presence. And then on that same trip in Japan, of course, I stayed in Sogenji temple with Shodo Harada Roshi. His nickname is the nuclear reactor of Zen. He's like a different animal. He's like a different animal. So committed, The nuclear reactor comes from his gut, or what is called Dantien in Chinese, from his gut cultivation. He really has intense energy, but he's also a very intense person, very intense, and very demanding of his students. Very joyful also, but very demanding. Nobody could keep up with him. Not even, he was 65 when I was in his monastery, and us 25-year-olds, 30-year-olds, no chance. We couldn't keep up with him. He was up all day, all night, 3-4 days a row, not sleeping, pretty intense. So Shodo Harada Roshi was impressive to me when I was younger. But above all, Harada Tangen Roshi, the old Buddha, he had sublime realization. I think he was a Mahasiddha. I stayed with him for 10 days after I left Dzogchen. But I could also say that now it's been 20 years this spring since I met Harada Tangen, the old Buddha, and I'm still staying with him. It was that, I got to speak with him privately, I think 3 times. Twice when it was just me and him on the garden of the monastery, and then once in, they call it dokusan in Japanese, which means like a formal one-on-one meeting talking about practice. And when he shouted at me, not scolded, I can tell you the story. So I was there. His English was very broken, and he was already 82 or 3 years old at that point. He was this, 83. So you know how the face of an old person looks like, wrinkles and all that. But he was chuckling all the time, kind of laughing and chuckling, bubbling, this bubbling joy. And he asked me that, who am I and why did I come to see him and what do I do? All these basic questions. And I told him that, I'm practicing Zen, martial arts, mainly sword arts, and calligraphy or Zen calligraphy. I'm practicing these 3 arts at the same time, and I want to devote my life to these arts. And he sitting 1 meter in front of me in this monastery room that was maybe 60 square meters big, and there's this like a big altar behind him, right? And then he said that when he was a university student, he also used to practice kendo. Kendo is Japanese sword art. And I remember him when I told him that I practiced also sword arts, that he said, "Oh, very good, very good. Natural fight, natural fight." Meaning natural fight. That I wasn't fighting with opponents. I was fighting or battling myself. Practicing martial arts not from a fighting point of view, but as a spiritual practice. And then he said that I used to practice kendo as a university student, that they used to go to these practice sessions. And then he let out a shout, and the whole temple room shook. Made of wood, it's like a big instrument. And he lets out a shout, and I kind of knew that it's probably coming. He's this old, chuckling, happy cat, but his shout still hasn't left me. By the way, there is a bit of a misunderstanding or lacking information about rainbow body, which is that rainbow body appears in Mahayana Buddhism also, in Zen Buddhism also. Zen Buddhism is a Mahayana school, and it's not a tantric school. It's not an esoteric path. But this happens in Mahayana also. Not only in Dzogchen, but I was just listening 2 nights ago, I was listening to an American female Tibetan Lama, and she was describing the details of tantric sexual practices in her lineage. And it was very complex, very, very complex. I mean, just extremely complex, different stages and different body fluids, and oh. And what for? For what purpose? Well, she said that they're doing this to realize emptiness. And I think she had a misunderstanding there, because pleasure practices are not for realizing emptiness, but for realizing the body of great bliss. Light body. But my point is that in tantric practices we have lots of technical details and complex stages, stage after stage and so on. In Zen, for example, they have none of that. They only have familiarization with the natural state. In Rinzai school they use the koans as techniques. Koan, like riddle is a poor translation, but koans. But also just basic sitting. Shikantaza, it's called in Japanese. But they don't practice these fancy tantric sex techniques. They don't speak of Thogal visions. And yet they can have the same result. So don't be fooled when somebody says fancy terms or fancy phrases in whatever fancy foreign language. Don't ever be fooled by that. Okay? These are very simple things. Very simple things. Applicable things. A recognizable nature of ours.